I don't know what this is called. What is this called? Or it's our after
After
hours,
hours.
our after hours thing.
Just
Where
finished
we
recording a podcast episode and we're still in a chatty mood.
I finally get to
exactly.
be myself.
You can start any fight with Jared you want.
But,
Yeah.
but, but you know what I mean? Where it's like I never lie, but it's like sometimes it's like when you're doing a show kind of thing, you have to put the specific foot there. It's like this: you can wear sneakers, but you got to wear dress shoes, and you like wearing dress shoes, but you don't want to wear dress shoes to Walmart. It's like that, and now
Yo.
I can go sneaker mode. Nah, I mean I tease, I tease. I mean that's true, that's true. But now it makes it think like I'm faking myself all the time. See, this is what happens when I start talking. Never mind. Move on. Move on. To the one audience member who's watching this live. Is it one, two?
I don't even know. Yeah. Well, no, it just started, so it'll be a minute. It'll be a minute for people to start filtering in. Oh, it says one per. Well, I'm the one person. But we'll see. We'll see.
I
People
talk to no
trickle
one. I talk to the wall, so it's basically like life. So
in.
I talk to myself all the time. We were just having this conversation. As a creative, I think it's just like in your brain, you talk to yourself all the time. You're narrating life to yourself all the time. And I
Agree.
realize this when I'm home alone. It is embarrassing. The stupid noises I will catch myself making to myself, like narrating and sound affecting everything. And I am horrible at both sound effects and narration.
I spend countless hours talking to myself.
do you
About
sing when you cook or sing in the shower?
I do.
See, I do too. I'll sing like folk songs like I'm working when I'm cooking. When the shower, I get to live my Broadway dreams.
No, yeah, I definitely sing. Um, Sometimes I monologue, and I come up with like really cool things that I feel like my characters would say, and whatever I'm writing, I do that, and then I respond to the
The
things that my
amount,
artists.
yes, the amount of time I test out character dialogue and scenes in front of the bathroom mirror. Mm.
Yes.
Or on the toilet.
Yes.
You sit
that
down on
that
the porcelain throne and suddenly you're King Lear.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I I know that we were gonna talk about something. We were gonna talk about the trends and how like we think that trends. Okay, so context. I was thinking about what were we talking about?
You sent me a voice note that told me that Sebastian told on himself that he was going to end the world.
Right, right. Okay, so I was talking to ChatGPT about this random thing where I was saying like I want to know what are the near level extinction events that could happen, and I want you to rank them by probability of them happening. And so ChatGPT gives me four, and it says like um, an asteroid of super volcano eruption or a gamma ray shot directly to the Earth. And then the final one, or technically the first one on the ranking, was AI driven global collapse. And the probability of that was the highest with an estimated timeline of 50 to 100 years before this happens, which is hilarious to me as I speak to AI about how it's going to end the world, and it chooses to tell on itself and let me know that it's going to kill me someday. So, but the interesting thing we were talking about was like how right now in fantasy, or not fantasy, in fiction, the big thing is people are talking about um what are people talking about? People are talking about like dark fantasy, dark romance. Like that's the thing that people are like super passionate about right now, and it's the trend that seems to like really be popping off. Um, but I
In the
think
2010s, it was dystopian and apocalyptic stories.
right.
So we had like Hunger Games and Divergent.
And if you think about that, like what was going on in the time of those things, like how we had just got Obama as a president, and there was, especially in the U.S., we had that, and the country was extremely divided about that kind of thing. Oddly enough, and so you had all of that, and so it was reflected in the fiction. And so it makes me think that based on just where we are politically right now, that there's a very good chance that um, dystopian is going to make uh, a comeback. To dystopian fiction is going to make a comeback to popularity. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have a feeling that's what's going to happen.
I think revolutions are going to come back. I'm
Mm.
because I had to get out of the house yesterday. So I went to see Mickey 17, which is good. It wasn't great, but it was good. I expected a little bit more, but it was quite like that. Though Robert Pattinson is amazing. He the stuff he does with his voice from this movie and The Boy and the Heron, that man's amazing. And I want him, if they ever dramatize Final Fantasy VII, I want him to play Sid officially now. If I've never said that before. Anyway, but the movie, they're like, satirize the oligarchs and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't necessarily anything. It was good, but it wasn't necessarily anything I hadn't seen before until near the end. And near the end, it started to emphasize they're like, these oligarchs are the invasive species. We would be fine without these people. And it was starting to build up this sense of the politicians, and it's not going to save us. We have to save ourselves from these oligarchs. And I've been starting to kind of notice that a little bit in conversations where it's like, it has to be us to do it now, right now. That's my not prediction, not guess. I don't know. I guess. I don't know. I don't deal with trends. Okay. I was in high school. I was not into anything popular. Okay. And
Same.
I finally changed my mind about Attack on Titan. Okay, that thing broke Crunchyroll what 3 times? 3 times. I was into that with everyone else. It was a huge popular anime. It was trending all the time, and I still didn't feel accepted by the world. Okay, if I'm not into the thing that's popular right now or then, I'm never gonna be. Okay, look what I'm wearing for Lord's sake. Okay? I have no idea about trends, but that's my 2 cents on that topic.
I
Yeah. I find that very interesting because I was connecting in my mind. I feel like there's a connection between dystopian and dark fantasy genres that I started thinking too much about, and then joked that Jared needed to help me diagram my brain so that it made more sense. But I feel like in dark fantasy we all want to know that other species deal with the struggle we do of trying to live through struggle. And then with dystopian, we just all want to know that there's still hope at the end of the world. There's still something in humanity worth fighting for. So I feel like there's a connection between those genres, and another connection between the revolution genre too. It all just kind of comes together to prove how much fiction is a healing balm for real life. It's not an escape from real life, but it gives hope to real life. It gives purpose and meaning to real life.
I get that. I think your guys are right. I think revolutions and dystopian stories share a lot of similarities. I feel like the revolution stories are kind of the aftermath of dystopian stories. And I think it also depends on our opinions as people, right? Like as citizens and how we see ourselves. Because I think there was to write dystopian fiction. I think as a society, you have to feel like there's a level of hopelessness within yourself. Like there's nothing we can do about it. So this is our way of painting our art in regards to it. And then revolution is more we feel empowered to do something about it. I watched Andor this weekend from beginning to end, and I realized how why I think that sticks right now and why I think it's doing so well. Like Star Wars in general, we talk about Star Wars and we said like how Star Wars became successful. People like how do I make the next Star Wars? How do I make the next Game of Thrones or whatever? And I think that a big part of that is it's all about timing, really. You can't for something to become iconic or classic. It's never the story. It's never the characters per se. Those play a part in it. Those are the ingredients. But I think that the biggest thing that makes something take something from great and cool and like a really good story to something that's memorable and legendary and classic is timing. And if like Star Wars, the original Star Wars came out at a very specific time, and because of that it became what it became. I think Andor being not that Andor season wasn't good because it was great. But I think that on the level of why, at least for me, why it hit the way that it did was because of the time in which we are currently in. When we look at like all the Trump stuff and all the all the stuff that's happening in the U.S. right now, it makes a lot of sense. And this also this whole like anti eat the rich, this whole eat the rich thing that's going around as well. And so with all of those things happening, it's kind of like, oh well, this makes sense. Andor makes sense to me as to why this would happen. I mentioned it before. The Lutheran I want to say Luthen's monologue about what have I sacrificed, as well as Marva's monologue at the funeral, are two of the best moments in that show. Uh, More so, besides just the prison uh, the prison statement over the loudspeaker. Um, those three monologues were they for some reason hit so differently when you in 2025 than I think that they would have hit if it was something that came out in like I don't know 2000, maybe 2015 is not a good example because we were losing our minds then too. But
2000,
We're losing our minds at every stage of
2005,
human.
2006, I would say,
yeah,
actually, because of one film,
which one?
V for Vendetta.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, not to overrun you, but to add my 2 cents,
Oh, please.
V for Vendetta, the movie, I will say positively, as someone who first saw them in high school, it's baby's first revolution, which is positive. I think that actually does good. It's not the comic. The comic is way, it's not darker, but it is way more honest to the soul. And it is not fun. And it's not black and white. And it's not blow up the old Bailey or Parliament and everything's honky dory. And I think back in the Bush era of the world, we could just blow up Parliament and play the Stones and yay. Now it's not like that. And I think that's part of why Cassian kind of works a lot like that it is way more nuanced.
That's really cool though. I think it's really cool just in general, like trends, how society does play a part in the way that we tell stories and why stories resonate with us. Because that kind of as a writer, that kind of makes you feel like sometimes, no matter how great your story is, um, timing can be a real difference maker for whether or not your story is any good. Not whether or not your story is any good, but if your story resonates. Um, because there's sometimes like it's like back in the day when vampires were like running crazy with in fiction, and then like 2000 by like 2012 2013 people were kind of over vampires, and then it was like but you could have had like the greatest vampire novel of all time and people were just like I don't really I'm not I'm kind of I'm over the whole vampire craze. And so I think that the same thing happened with dystopian books because there was a time where like that was like everybody wanted to do that. Like that was like every movie that was coming out was something dystopian, or you had every book that was like, oh, dystopian this or dystopian that, and it was just like I remember that. I remember that crazy phase. Like not just like Divergent and Hunger Games and like the obvious ones, but like even just like you had like these really niche ones that would just like come out and it was just like whenever you go on like Wattpad, which is also a great example, a great place to get a temperature of like what people are really writing about. But like everybody was doing a dystopian story of some kind, and I even did a couple of dystopian stories where I was just like, yeah, this is gonna be so freaking good, and it was like, bro, it's 2014. It's done now. You can stop. but
You can
but
go to the
like
Great Havens now.
yeah. So like yeah, I still have them in my folder of stories that I will one day tell, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting for um for the opportunity to write them without being like, oh god, put that away.
An interesting thing, though, coming from this conversation, because it can be really tempting to think that, if you're trying to strategically plan your next bestseller, um, following the popular trends and tropes of the time is a very easy pitfall to fall into. Um, and sure, you might get a really great story from it, and maybe it is exactly what you want to write and is the story that you're trying to tell. But the trend is going to be over by the time you have that written. And every single story that started these trends were written when it wasn't a trend. So in essence, you find a story that resonates, you tell a story that resonates with the current world that we live in, other people who are experiencing the feelings and fear that you're experiencing. You tell a story that speaks to that, and you set the trends. And that's even better than trying to, jump on the coattails of a dying trend that everyone's sick of and is going to, be over by the time you actually get what you're writing published.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, because like the grand scheme of things, like a movie, same with movies. Like when you're writing a screenplay or when you're writing whatever, like it's all the same. Like the amount of time, the effective time that it takes to write, to produce, like for a movie, for instance, short into the thing that's we're talking mainstream films here, not necessarily indie films, but like
Oh no, I
the
think indie films have their own little
they have their own little
trends.
yeah,
They're like
exactly.
everyone goes, no, indie films are pure horse malarkey.
Yeah.
No offense. I love
But
Bud Light. Come on.
they have their own, but
Be
like
honest. Be honest.
exactly, they have like this, like I think it's like a minimum. You have a minimum of maybe 9 months between starting of development and filming to and editing and all of that to complete a story. Like at the earliest of you getting a movie, it's going to probably be about 9 months before it's actually done. Writing a book, I would say maybe the earliest you're going to get one out is probably a year. So by the time, so if you have an idea that's a trend, keep in mind that by the time your book is finally out into the world, it's going to be possibly a year, 9 months later from when you had that idea, and things will be drastically, especially in this 30-second, 30-second attention span life world that we live in. There's no way that the idea that you have in April, or sorry, in January, is going to be anywhere near as popular or successful in December. So don't worry so much about the um don't worry so much about the trend of what's popular in the moment, because I think that it's never going to last.
Yeah, what you should be taking from this, if you're a writer, is feel encouraged that you don't have to be shackled by whatever trend is selling at the present moment. You just have to write a story that is true and that resonates with people.
Exactly. I think that's exactly the case. I think that you just kind of have to go. I think that if you must chase trends, I think it's more important to lock your story into universal themes, things that are never going to go out of style. Um, that's where I would start, as opposed to like, oh, vampires or like spaceships or space operas or whatever. Like that kind of shit, that shit comes and goes. But like, good versus evil, or like, those are things that they will always exist. And so you can tell a story that surrounds those kinds of things and still be pretty solid as far as you go. All that said, did you guys have any other thoughts before we dip? I'm gonna not keep us here too long today.
I think we basically covered it. That was
I don't like
Oh,
trends.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't like
There's a
trends
good
that are
reason to hate them.
manufactured by the corporations, man. Like,
True.
to be fair, that's not entirely true. You have trends like in memes. People will just really get hooked on a meme. That's fine. That's natural. But like, well, they have to have a gun on the poster. That's corporate, man. Trends are bad. Trends
Yeah.
are bad. And the people who buy into trends are often terrible people, at least in my experience. Not always, of course, but like, trends are bad.
They sell.
Yep.
They sell things.
Do what I did. Experience all the trends years after they've happened, and then you can experience them from a true perspective without the influence of everyone else.
Like, I think that you should rely on trends only when you are, only when you are when you're an executive, and your job is to sell books or movies, or video games or whatever. When your job is to sell stuff, then you can worry about the trends because that's your job. But when you are a creative, your job is not to worry about selling anything, even though that is the goal. The goal is to ultimately put stuff out that people are going to buy. But the real thing to focus on is telling a good story. Tell a story that matters
To
to
that end, I
to
think
others.
what matters is the pitch. You can
Yeah.
pitch anything and make it sound different. You can pitch. I could pitch the Rings of Power as the most glorious thing of all time. So it's all about the pitch when you get to it, down to it. So you can write whatever you want. You just have to pitch it a little differently to make it seem like a trend. No, it's not. Which I think Robert Kirkman famously did with The Walking Dead. He just wanted to make a zombie comic. They said, well, zombies aren't really popular. So he said, at least in my understanding, he said, it's aliens. So like, yay, it's aliens. And he goes, it's not going to be. Right? The first issue. And the editor goes, oh, I didn't say anything about the alien twist. He goes, it'll come later. And they said, oh, well, it's already doing well. So The Walking Dead.
It'll come later.
No, he pitched it. He bought into the trend for the marketing, but he didn't affect the art.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so do that. Come up with a good pitch. And just don't shackle yourself. Don't shackle yourself to any one particular story, or one particular trend or anything. Be free. That's the whole point of telling stories. Is to do that. So yeah, but anyway, we are going to get out of here. It looks like we got one other person that came and stayed for a little bit. So thank you for coming and thank you for watching. We are out of here. We do this every single Monday and Friday. We sometimes rotate each other out, but we are usually here talking about stuff, stories, and if you're interested in that, feel free to do so. Thank you for watching, and have a great day, guys. All right, that went well.
First YouTube Live.
We had one person